In the early 14th century, as empires weakened and new powers rose, a small but determined principality in Anatolia prepared for a defining moment that would change its destiny forever. And that principality was the Ottomans, led by Osman Gazi and later his son Orhan Gazi, who would fulfill a dream that had long stirred in the hearts of his people, a dream to capture the city of Bursa, a rich, fortified, and strategically vital Byzantine stronghold nestled beneath the shadow of Mount Uludag, known not only for its wealth and location but for its symbolic significance as a gateway to empire and legacy. And as the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum collapsed and Byzantine control fragmented, the moment had arrived, the time for the Ottomans to rise beyond tribal warfare and establish something permanent, something greater than battles and borders. Osman Gazi had envisioned the fall of Bursa as a milestone that would elevate his people from frontier warriors into founders of a state, and as he aged and his health declined, he entrusted this mission to his son Orhan, who now carried not only a sword but a sacred duty in his hands. And as Osman lay on his deathbed in 1326, he whispered a final command that would echo through history: take Bursa, not just for conquest but for identity, for a beginning, and for the soul of a nation yet unborn. Orhan Gazi, young but wise, understood the weight of this task and approached it not with haste or arrogance, but with precision, strategy, and patience, surrounding the city, cutting off its supplies, building forts and outposts to suffocate its defenders slowly and methodically, knowing that a siege was not about fire and fury, but about endurance and resolve. And as the months turned into years, the people within Bursa suffered under scarcity while the Ottomans grew stronger, not just in arms but in vision, for around their camps they planted gardens, built wooden homes, and held Friday prayers beneath the sky, declaring without words that they were no longer outsiders, they were the rightful future of this land. The siege of Bursa was not just a military maneuver, it was a psychological war, a demonstration of purpose and perseverance. And while the Byzantine governor held fast, hoping for relief that never came, Orhan held even firmer, refusing to destroy, choosing instead to wait, to surround, and to offer peace through surrender. The camp outside Bursa began to look more like a city than a war zone, with schools for the children, markets for the soldiers, and scholars who recited verses beneath oil lamps at night, and this calm, disciplined atmosphere began to unsettle the defenders, who realized they were not resisting raiders, but a people who had already made Bursa their spiritual home. Then came the message that Osman had passed away, and with that, the siege took on new urgency. For now Orhan was not just a commander, he was a leader, a bey with a father's legacy to honor and a nation to guide. And with renewed vigor he tightened the siege, escalated pressure, and offered terms for peaceful surrender. After a long and bitter wait, the defenders finally gave in, unable to hold out any longer, and in a rare moment of historic restraint, the Ottomans did not storm the gates but entered with calm, with reverence, and with prayers on their tongues, walking through the streets of Bursa not as conquerors dripping in pride, but as founders fulfilling a sacred promise. And it was in this moment, more than in any battle, that the Ottomans truly became an empire in the making. The city was not looted, its people were not massacred, and its churches were not destroyed. For Orhan knew that the strength of a state came not from how it won war, but from how it managed peace. And so began the transformation of Bursa, the planting of new seeds in old soil. As administration was established, trade was reopened, and justice was served with both firmness and fairness. Orhan buried his father Osman in the newly captured city, not far from where he had once stood, and pointed toward it, declaring that this land would one day be theirs, and over his grave a tomb was built, modest yet sacred, which would become a symbol for generations of Ottomans who would pause before campaigns to seek blessings and remember where it all began. Bursa was now the capital, not merely in name but in soul. And unlike the grand cities of the West or the ancient capitals of the East, it began not with palaces or thrones, but with intention, with humility, and with unity. As mosques were built beside marketplaces, schools beside barracks, and gardens beside fortifications, reflecting the harmony the Ottomans sought between faith, society, and strength. The conquest of Bursa in 1326 was not just the taking of a city, it was the claiming of an identity. The beginning of a new era where the Ottomans would no longer be known as frontier raiders, but as leaders, rulers, and creators of order in a chaotic world. And as trade flourished, as coins were minted in the name of Orhan, and as scholars and artisans made their home in this reborn city, the empire's heart began to beat with a rhythm that would one day echo across 3 continents. In every sense strategic, economic, political, and spiritual, Bursa became the root of the Ottoman tree, from which would grow branches that touched the Balkans, North Africa, Arabia, and beyond. And while later cities like Edirne and Istanbul would shine even brighter, it was Bursa that lit the first flame, proving that even the smallest beginnings can shape the course of history, and it was here, among the hills and springs of Bursa, that the Ottomans found not just land, but legitimacy, not just victory, but vision, not just a capital, but a cradle of empire. After the peaceful entry into Bursa, Orhan Ghazi did not pause to celebrate but began shaping the city into the heart of a new and rising empire, recognizing that conquest was only the beginning and that true power lay in what came after. And with this in mind, he transformed Bursa from a conquered territory into the first structured capital of the Ottomans, a model city that balanced faith, governance, trade, and education in a way that no other Anatolian town had before. He commissioned the construction of grand mosques, public baths, caravanserais, and schools, laying the architectural and administrative foundation of Ottoman urban planning. And these structures were not just for appearance, they were part of a vision that placed the citizen, the merchant, the scholar, and the soldier all within a system that felt ordered, secure, and guided by both spiritual and legal frameworks. Orhan also established the first Ottoman mint in Bursa, allowing the state to issue its own currency, a clear message to allies and rivals alike that the Ottomans were now more than just warriors. They were sovereign, independent, and capable of managing complex economic systems. And this step helped stimulate trade routes that passed through Bursa, turning it into a hub of commerce between Asia and Europe. Artisans flocked to the city, setting up workshops. Marketplaces thrived with textiles, spices, and tools. And the local population grew rapidly as people from surrounding villages and provinces settled in for safety and opportunity. Bursa was no longer a city waiting to be defined. It was now defining others, and through it, the Ottomans learned how to govern diversity, manage wealth, and administer justice. One of Orhan's most lasting decisions was the creation of a structured legal and religious system within the city, appointing cadis to oversee Islamic law and resolve disputes, ensuring that no citizen, regardless of faith or origin, was left without a voice in the new Ottoman order, and this fairness attracted even non-Muslims who saw stability and opportunity under Ottoman rule. It was in Bursa that the earliest version of the Ottoman bureaucracy began to form, with scribes, record keepers, tax officials, and commanders working side by side to maintain order. And from these humble beginnings emerged a system that would later support one of the largest empires in the world. Even the military began to evolve, with the groundwork for the Janissary Corps emerging from policies and reforms started during Orhan's reign, policies tested and implemented in and around Bursa, and these troops, recruited through careful strategy and structured discipline, would later become the backbone of Ottoman military dominance. The spiritual life of Bursa was also rich, with mosques like the Hutavendigar Mosque and later the Green Mosque becoming centers not only of worship but of learning. charity, and public discourse, and through these institutions, the Ottomans blended tradition with innovation, creating a society where scholars, clerics, and administrators shaped public life together. The symbolism of Bursa went beyond its buildings and bazaars. It represented the first time the Ottomans exercised true sovereignty, where they didn't just rule but governed, didn't just fight but nurtured, and the respect with which they treated the people, infrastructure, and cultural heritage of the city demonstrated a level of political maturity rare for such a young state. This respect earned the Ottomans admiration even from former enemies, and as word spread of the prosperity and order within Bursa, neighboring territories became more willing to negotiate than resist, more likely to cooperate than rebel, and this subtle diplomacy, born out of how Bursa was managed, helped the Ottomans expand without constant warfare. In later years, even when Edirne was made the new capital in 1363, Bursa remained a spiritual and symbolic core, and it continued to influence Ottoman architecture, legal practice, and city planning for generations, acting as a permanent reference point for what Ottoman rule could and should look like. The tombs of Osman and Orhan remained sacred, regularly visited by sultans who sought guidance and blessing before launching campaigns or enacting reforms. And even after the monumental conquest of Constantinople in 1453, which marked the transformation of the Ottomans into a full-fledged empire, it was Bursa that they remembered as the place where empire began in spirit. Bursa had done more than elevate the Ottomans, it had validated them, and that validation came not through destruction but through construction, not through tyranny but through fairness, and not through fear but through leadership. It became the place where a warrior state found its soul, where dreams of empire took shape in law, trade, and faith, and where the Ottoman legacy was planted deep in stone and soil. Even today, the city of Bursa carries this legacy, with its early Ottoman monuments standing as reminders of a time when a group of Anatolian warriors dared to think beyond battles, dared to imagine cities, laws, systems, and futures, and in doing so, they transformed a conquest into a civilization. The lessons of Bursa patience, justice, humility, and vision echoed through centuries, influencing how later sultans ruled vast territories with diverse populations and complex challenges. And though their palaces grew grander and their armies stronger, the model established in Bursa remained in their hearts, proving that empires don't start with emblems or anthems, but with leaders willing to build where others only destroy. The Conquest of Bursa in 1326 was not the loudest victory, nor the bloodiest campaign, but it was the most meaningful chapter in the early Ottoman story, a chapter where ideals became action, and where the first true capital gave rise to a legacy that would shape the course of history for more than 600 years.